everybody. Welcome to this week's Writers Chat, where writers like to get together, talk about all things writing for writers and by writers. And we are really excited to see everybody today. We see a lot of our regular crew in the chat. And those of you that take the time to watch the replay, we know there's a whole group of you there that are part of our writing community that watch it. And this will be one you will want to watch today. So I'm glad to see you all here today. I'm glad to see Melissa and Johnny and Brandy with us, and we have a special guest with us today. And now I'm going to read her favorite, Charissa Brim, and I'm going to read you her official. So you get the background first, but then I'm going to tell you a couple fun secrets. Charissa has a bachelor's in communication studies, and listen to what her master's is. If this is not so cool, her master's is in international tourism. Wouldn't that be cool? You put that with writing. Isn't that a neat element of flavor to that? And she lives in New Orleans. We were talking about that before we started the recording on that. And she really likes to explore spaces and all around us. And I know she's been internationally traveled. She really, really travels. But what's cool about it, her bio, she says she likes to explore the spaces around us, between us, and within us. Isn't that a real element of depth? I like that. She likes to help others find their voice through her work as a copywriter, as a social media manager, and an advocate. And she is a real advocate for a lot of people on that. She balances inspiration and strategies, and she supports creatives like all of us are, curating authentic and rewarding online presence. And that's what we asked for her to talk about today, about working smarter, not harder, in our online presence, because she does this as both background for people and she does it for herself, her own work. Now, I promised you something else about her, and I want to let her know how I met Charissa. As we were in a Hope Writers Mastermind a couple years ago. Now I was trying to think, even how it's getting longer now ago, isn't it? And they put us all in these little small groups where you didn't know anybody, and this introvert, like, oh, here I go in this small group. And this delightful lady came along and just brought life and joy. And she taught me how to dance and sing again. And it just live with joy and hope, and look at her smile. Don't you just love it? But anyway, she really models that, which is what I deeply believe, how God really asks us to live in this wonderful world he gives us. And she taught me, she lives in New Orleans, and she has taught me that Mardi Gras is more than just one day in the year. And that is same true as God's gift of each day. It's more, each day is a gift. So she exemplifies that. So Charissa, thank you for spending time with us today and giving us some inspiration on this social media beast that we all look at on that. So I'm going to hand it over to you and let you start.
Awesome. Jean, thank you so much for that. How could I not smile hearing that? Man, that's so encouraging.
So cool.
Oh man. Okay. Well, I am so happy to be here. Thank you for letting me share this space. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. I do have a little bit of a presentation. I just find visuals are easier for me, and so hopefully those of you who are more visual, this will be helpful for you too. All right, have I done it right? Do I have Okay, perfect. So when it comes to, let's back up a little bit, social media, I, don't want to hop on here and tell you all about how to get 10,000 followers and, make six figures with Instagram posts, because that's not really my expertise. My expertise is figuring out how to use what you already have and do a lot more by doing less. You guys are writers, you're community movers and shakers, you're full people. And I think that sometimes the humanity gets lost in this like treadmill that we have going with social media. And so I kind of want to restore that for us a little bit today. So today we're talking doing more by doing less, working smarter, not harder, while also establishing a professional, sustainable, and strategic online presence. So a little bit about me, just to kind of expand off of what Jean already read. Why the heck should you listen to me? I, yes, have a bachelor degree in communication studies, a master's in international tourism. I used to be an event manager prior to COVID, and then that became the breeding ground for the apocalypse. So I had to get out of that. And so I kind of accidentally became this writer, copywriter, social media manager. And what I want to kind of just encapsulate in this summary is that I care about communicating. I care about communicating honestly and well, and then creating systems to help us do that. So that's kind of where all of those different expertises kind of funnel into today's talk. Okay, so here's the disclaimer. I feel a little bit nervous about talking about social media because it's daunting. Like, raise of hands, how many people feel intimidated by social media? Probably most of us. You might have heard, yeah, there's Jean's hand, yeah. I'm sure a lot of us have been recipients of all the shoulds. We've been should on, if you will. Things that we need to be doing, things that we need to be learning, and it's a lot to keep up with. I'm someone who is constantly looking at what the experts are saying, what they're suggesting, and to be honest, sometimes it's conflicting advice or pertains to one industry, but how do we as writers take that on for us? And then the worst feeling of all is when you're trying all these things and then the results are inconsistent. You can't really figure out what worked and why, or why something else didn't work, which can, make us feel really deflated. So today I want to kind of, pull back the layers, sift through all that, and give us some helpful tools and pointers and honestly just postures for how to keep pace with the trends in social media, how to feel more confident as you try new things and try to figure out which of all the new things you want to try, and then how to really decipher what your sweet spot is and how to, make your magic on social media. So in order to do that, I think there's really 3 different approaches. And these are the 3 approaches that we're going to camp out on today. Now, I understand some of you might have a more in-depth understanding of social media. Some of you might just kind of feel overwhelmed by it. My goal today is to kind of give like a high level with a few dips in between. So hopefully there's something for everyone. I know even just putting this together for me, even though I'm in social media all the time, it was very helpful to be reminded of all these things. So, the information going into what I'm sharing today comes from my work as a copywriter. I work as a, what's the word? Here we are writers and I can't think of words. I work as a contractor. There it is. I work as a contractor for a company that has hundreds of clients, most of which I've had my hand in their social media. Anything from quilt makers to authors, doctors, cancer researchers, all over the place. So anything that I share comes from all these different industries, and what I've seen boil down to make social media more effective on the social media front, but also on the personal front. So the 3 approaches are a professional approach, a sustainable approach, and a strategic approach. So let's dive into the professional side of things. Okay, so if you were to look at a, big company who spends a lot of money on marketing and uses social media for their marketing, you would see, if you kind of, hover up, that they spend most of their money and most of their time nailing down a brand. And then from there, they jump off. And so today I just want to camp out for a second on this brand idea, which maybe you're very familiar with it. Maybe this is a good reminder. Maybe this is kind of new. But the reason I'm starting here is because if you have a very clear understanding of who you are, who you're talking to, and how you're talking to them, that impacts all the other decisions you make for social media. So you don't have to sit there and waffle through, what should I do next? What post should I make? Should I try this reel? You kind of already have a roadmap laid out for you. So when we think about a professional approach, what we're really saying is that professionalism means credibility, right? If someone has a professional online presence, you're going to be more likely to believe what they say and think, hey, this is for me. I want to spend my time reading this. I want to spend my time engaging with this. So there's 3 ways to kind of put out this professional vibe, if you will. The first is you want to stick to and create a brand The second is you want to remember that consistency is always better than glitz and glam, which I like some glitz and glam, so this is important for me to remember too. And ultimately, what you're trying to do is eliminate mental clutter for yourself and your reader. So let's kind of go through each of these individually. Okay, creating and sticking to a brand. When I talk about a brand, and I'm not going to spend too much time here, but just again, setting this foundation, there's really three different elements that I think of. So the first are the guiding principles of the brand. So this is what you value, how you communicate your message, who you're communicating your message to, what their felt needs are. These are kind of all of the intangibles, the behind the scenes. I'm going to paint that portion of brand as person. Then you have the things you probably are naturally thinking of when you think of branding, which are like the colors, the fonts, the logos. These are the visible pieces to your brand. So for this metaphor, we're going to say these are the clothes on the person. And then lastly, you have your vehicles for communicating about your brand. So this is how you're using social media, what kinds of posts that you choose, what words you use to communicate the intangibles. These are like the cars. So basically with a brand, you have a person wearing clothing, traveling in a couple different cars. So if you can get very clear about each of those, it really streamlines social media, and you don't have to overthink it much more than that. So let me give you kind of an example from my own personal brand. So as a writer, so this is separate from my copywriting. This is me as the inspired writer that I am on, I don't know, 30% of my time. I speak to women and men, but particularly women who have experienced trauma and are trying to move from a place of disconnection with themselves and the world around them to a place of connection. And so in doing that, a few of my core values are authenticity, humor. I think humor is really disarming and kind of help us talk about these, intense subjects. And then community. I think healing happens in community. So my posture when it comes to social media, I'm always considering authenticity, humor, and community. So because these are my core values, those dictate the trends that I hop on and how I use social media as a tool. So one of the many different tools on social media is Instagram stories. So not everybody needs to hop into stories. Maybe that's not aligned with your core values or what you're trying to do on social media. For me, when I get to use stories, like Jean was saying earlier, for those of you who were on the call, she just recently saw me post about Jazz Fest. She's seen me talk about Mardi Gras. Stories are where I get to kind of peel back the layers and show the authentic part of my life, show the joy, show the fullness. That's core to what I'm trying to do with my message. I'm trying to show that even if you're wrestling with trauma and trying to heal from it, you can still have a full, vibrant life. And it's that tension where I like to live. So stories are a really effective way for me to share a little bit. Sorry, I keep hitting my microphone. For me to share a little bit about my real life and kind of build out the authentic parts. This is where I can pepper in humor in a tasteful way, because a lot of the topics that I talk about are not so funny. And then when it comes to community, I love using the questions and the polls in stories. Now, here's an example of how this might change depending on what your brand is and what you're trying to do on social media. If you're an author or a writer who has more of a posture of an expert, maybe you're trying to share about something specific, you might want to consider using questions in your stories so that people can ask you the questions. You can answer, you can provide, great information and get a pulse on what your people need to know more about. Now, for me, because one of my brand core values is community, I use the questions in the polls to ask my readers questions. So I'll ask them about their experiences with certain things. I'll touch base on how they feel in different scenarios. And then I share those answers so that they can see, oh, okay, I'm a part of a community who also feels this way. Or, oh my gosh, those are words that I didn't know to put to my experience, but there they are. I try to level the playing field. So that's one way that my core brand values dictate the tools that I use on social media and how I use them. Similarly, when it comes to the visuals, you're not going to find an overly filtered picture of me because I want to present my real life. I want you to see the wall back there that's half drywall, half whatever was here before we moved in. We're all works in progress. This all communicates the same message that I'm trying to go for. My branding is subtle. So my posts, my graphics are a plain background, just font, because again, I'm not trying to separate myself from my community. I just want to be like, hey, here are my words. Like, I want to remove any barriers to any sort of hierarchy. I'm in it with you. And then when it comes to reels, dun dun dun, the dreaded reels, you're not going to find me forcing myself to do reels that don't feel natural. So a lot of creators have found great success with the reels that, you like point to the different words. I tried that once and I couldn't stop laughing because I just felt ridiculous. So that's not everyone's, experience. Some people love it and have great success, but for me, it just didn't work because I value authenticity. I'm not going to do that. But as Jean mentioned, I love to dance. So I might be more prone to kind of figure out if there's a way I can use a dancing reel to communicate my message. So all that to say, consider for you, yourself as an author and a writer, who are you communicating to? What do they need? What does that reflect about your brand's values? And how can those values inform what you do on social media? Now, the second part of this headline that I'll just briefly touch on, it's create and stick to a brand. So this is where us creatives sometimes have a hard time. We are creative. We are thinking of new ways to present ourselves and to interact with the world. And we see shiny things and it's fun to try something different. But the whole point of a visual brand is to allow ourselves to be recognizable to our readers and to the people who come across us. So you might be in your graphics and your content all the time, so you are overly familiar. So it might start to feel stale for you. But the truth is your readers, especially on social media, they're only coming across your content every now and then. So you want to make sure that when they see it, they know, oh, that's Jean's. Oh, that's Catherine's. There's a clear communication. Because over time, what you're trying to do is go from recognizable to known. So they know who you are. They know what you're going to talk about. They know what to expect. When people know what to expect, they're more willing to invest their time, eventually their money. If there's uncertainty, it's not worth it, right? There's plenty of other things. So they go from recognizing to knowing you. Once they know you, they begin to trust you, to trust your content. And then from there, they can start to like you. And when people start to like you, that's when you get your loyalty. They start sharing your words, sharing your books. And eventually, if you are selling books, products, courses, whatever it is that you're doing, they're more likely to convert in that way because they like you and they trust you. So that really is why it is so important to have a visual and to just stay with it so that people can put your message to your graphics just automatically. Now, if you do want to make a shift, my suggestion is that you make it kind of subtle and that there's a reason for it. I was finding that some of my fonts were hard to read the wordier I got. And so step one was be less wordy, always the to-do list on my on my writing to-dos. But in addition to that, so my text was kind of hard to read the wordier I got. So I had to kind of make a change to one of my fonts. But that was just a very subtle 1 degree different, and it wasn't a completely different font. So if you're finding things aren't working, you can make some subtle shifts, but make sure there's a reason why. If you have a new book coming out and there's some themes or graphics that are represented in that book that you don't currently represent, that might be a good time to start to incorporate those elements. But I would suggest not making a huge change, changing your colors, changing everything. That kind of throws your reader off. Okay, so let's look at some examples of this professional approach with branding, both content and visuals. So over here, these are some of my posts. So core to my message is I want to share that you're not the only one and that your response to trauma makes sense. So voila, there are two content buckets that I can use for graphics and contents that create consistency for my reader. So it's kind of hard to see because it's small on the screen, but over here we have, you're not the only one who, ... and then it makes sense that ... So I just fill in the blank with different statements that I think my reader would really connect to. That's something that I don't have to think super hard about because I decided once that that was going to be one of my brand content buckets. Now over here on the right, this is for one of my other clients. She's a therapist and author, and she has a whole book that has journal prompts and helpful ways to combat anxiety. Now, if you guys have a book, you guys have social media for days. Turns out you can repurpose that all the time and no one's gonna know. So here's a perfect example. We created some graphic templates, which my understanding is you all have at least some understanding of Canva. So for all of her journal prompts, this is what they look like. You have the name of the journal prompt from her book, the actual prompt that she writes in her book, and then she has more of like a kind of cartoony style. She speaks to adolescents. And so then you just find a graphic that matches that journal prompt. Boom, there you go. Don't have to reinvent anything. The content is already there and you can just plug it in each month, however many times you choose to use that. She does the same thing with her thinking traps, thought patterns that we can get into that cause anxiety. You just fill in the blanks, choose a different image and move on. So that's, what I call plug and chug. Create the systems, create the templates, the content buckets, have all of those in place so that you can take your pre-existing content and just plug it in, chug it out. So for some of you, maybe you do have journal prompts, which is awesome. Maybe you have some prayers. Maybe there are meditations or principles. These are all great ways to reuse that content. Dovetailing off of that, consistency is always better than glitz and glam. So when someone comes to your social media profile, and I'm specifically thinking about Instagram because it's just laid out a little bit neater, it's all there, but same if it's like your Pinterest or your Facebook, they're kind of doing a research on you, right? What does this person have for me? If it's been a while since you've posted and you kind of have content all over the place, it's going to be hard for that person to realize that you have words for them. So by being consistent, you can tell someone, hey, this is what you're going to get. You're going to get it this amount of, like this often, and it will be helpful for you. That's really all they need to know. Now, it is always easier to add than it is to take away. So be honest and be self-searching about what consistency can look like for you. I don't know, maybe like 6 or 8 months ago, consistency looked like, for me, having a blog post, reading the blog post out loud, making social media posts out of that. It was a lot. And to be honest, with my content, it was too much. And so I had to scale back. So now consistency for me looks like 2 posts a week. I probably do a story once, maybe twice a month. But other than that, anything above and beyond that is just extra. I know that I can maintain the 2 posts a week and the story, and that helps my internal system settle down and know that I'm doing enough, that I'm okay. It might change eventually, but for right now, that consistency is more important than doing something big and super impressive once in a blue moon. So that brings me to the last point on the slide, which is that it doesn't have to be impressive to be effective. So there are all kinds of authors and thought leaders who have social media posts that are a white square with black text, and that is it. And you know what? Sometimes, like, I think Adam Grant, right? He has these great leadership ideas. He gets so much interaction off of those posts, and it's not super glitzy and glammy. It's not super up with the trends. So if that is a barrier that you have to putting your content out, just be reminded that the content is really the most important thing. So use your words. You're a writer. That's what you do. Write good words for the people who need it, and let the rest just kind of fall off. Last point until we move on from professional is that the whole goal of this is to eliminate mental clutter. So I'm using Kendra Adachi. She's the lazy genius. I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with her, but she has a core principle, which is decide once. And that's kind of what I'm proposing with this like whole brand and professional approach is decide once what your brand is, how you're going to communicate it, what it's going to look like, what your content buckets are, so that you don't have to like sit there and worry about it all the time. Because that's what happens, right? We like sit there and we stress ourselves out and we shame ourselves for not doing more. And then we kind of put out chaotic things, and that feels cluttered for the reader too. So make a plan, take time to just figure out, okay, I'm doing 1 post a week, I'm doing 2 posts a week. These are the posts for each of the days, and I'm just going to copy and paste this plan each month until it stops working or until I want to do something different. When you're creating that plan, I do have one suggestion for you, and that is to balance the types of posts. So we are writers. We love to have really gushy, emotional, thought-provoking words. We want to take people on a journey. We want them to like carry with them, our words and our sentiment. But sadly, that is not the best thing for social media. Wow, wow. So what I find is it's helpful to have a balance of didactic posts and those more personal, fleshed out posts. So by didactic, I mean your tips, maybe some mantras, reminders, if you have prayers or principles, something that's really clear and offers like a nugget, a little bite-sized nugget for the reader that they know exactly what to do with it. Then you can sprinkle in some of those more emotionally compelling and connective posts where you share maybe a story, how you started writing about what you write about, maybe a recent reflection, or you share about an opportunity that you've had as a writer. The whole point is that, again, when someone comes to your social media presence, you want them to know that your words are for them as fast as possible. If they come to your page and all they see is pictures of leaves and your feet and a coffee cup, all very classic posts that a lot of us have probably seen and probably posted ourselves. If that's all they see, how on earth am I supposed to know if that's for me? But if those are sprinkled around with tips for creating more bandwidth in your life, or 3 mantras to calm your anxiety, something that goes along with what you write about, that helps them know, okay, I belong here. This information's for me. And then they'll be more likely to explore the other posts. Okay, that was the biggest section, so we can all take a deep breath. That is kind of the professional posture and approach to social media that I suggest. It really sets a good foundation. Now, if that feels like a lot, that's okay. You can do little bite sizes and add on to it as you go. So kind of take the core idea and play with it and let your professional approach just swell as you become more skilled at it. So now on to probably my favorite part, the sustainable approach. I live on this side of the scale when it comes to burnout. I go too hard in the paint. I want to do it all and I want to do it big. My New Orleans is showing it's hard to live sustainable like that, especially with social media. So in social media, because there are constantly new ideas and these like new trends, if you are not able to sustain your current pace, then everything else that gets added is going to feel overwhelming and you're going to feel like you're getting behind. You don't have to feel that way if you have something that's kind of sustaining itself, that you can just pepper in new things. So let's look at how to be more sustainable. Use what you got. If I could just sum up this entire talk, that's what it is. When it comes to social media, as a creative and as a writer, use what you've got. You have so much. It might not look like social media yet, but it can get there really easily. So here are 3 different ways that you can use what you already have. Number 1, notice your energy. So as a writer, what brings you to life? What kind of writing do you absolutely love? Maybe it's long form. Maybe that's your sweet spot. Maybe you're really clever. And so you have, your like quippy one-offs. Is writing kind of like a secondary thing, but you really just love conversation, maybe you're more of a speaker, whatever it is that energizes you and brings you life, start there. Once you do that, we can repurpose it and make it social media ready. But begin there, because when you try to put the cart before the horse and you start with social media, that's where a lot of us, we put so much time and effort in, we get overwhelmed, we get kind of lost in what we're doing, and then the effects and the results aren't exactly what we wanted for the amount of time. And here we go, like careening down the highway towards burnout. So do what brings you life. From there, you can repurpose it, and you can do that really strategically. Here we go to point number 2, batch your content, and then batch the work within that content. So if you are someone who wants to write long form, take a chunk of time, brainstorm, 10 to 12, I don't know, just no bad ideas, right? Throw everything on the page, 10 to 12 blog topics that you can get into, and just like really let your brain just go. So instead of brainstorming, what should I do this week, and then writing, do all the brainstorm first. And then at a different time, or maybe a different day, you can go back into that list, pick out 1, maybe 2, and you can get in the deep mode of writing. Once you have a couple things written, you can then take a chunk of time and batch the content pull. So you can go through your blog and say, "Ooh, that's a good quote," or maybe if I rework that could be 3 tips. You can kind of go in and piece out the things that might make more sense in your social media calendar. Once you have that content pulled out, then you take it and you have your graphic day, and you just plug and chug into the graphics. By separating these different ideas, you can start to get in the flow and really get lost and kind of get into that deep work and that deep focus, which oftentimes is where you feel more fulfilled and you're able to create things faster and quicker, so more efficiently. And then lastly, with all of that, using what you've got, repurpose, repackage, and reinvent. So repurposing, that's kind of what we were just talking about. If you have a blog post, turn that into a couple different social media posts. If you have a webinar, or maybe you just recently spoke at an event, see if you can get a recording or a transcript, repackage what was once a presentation into a written form of a blog or into a couple social media posts. And then lastly, inspire yourself. You have information, you have words already. Let that be a jumping point for what you should write about next. So maybe if you already have somewhat of an online presence, you can kind of go back a couple of years, see what you already wrote, and you've had 2 years to think about that topic. So maybe you have new things to say. So let your old words reinvent kind of what you want to say now. Take a couple pieces that you still love the phrasing, you love how you ended it, plop that into a new post and just sprinkle in some new ideas. So no one's going to know. No one is tracking your social media like you are. And honestly, we all need to hear things 3 to 5 times in order for it to lock. So if you feel like you've just repeated yourself over and over in social media or on your blogs, just be reminded that that's actually really important as a communicator to do that, so that your readers understand what you're trying to get at. So let's look at some examples. This is one of my clients. She is incredible. She is a leader in leadership. Is that the way to say that? She is an expert when it comes to healthcare leadership and putting people first. She's very busy and she does a lot of webinars. And so that's where our social media plan starts for her. She records her webinars, and then we take that recording, we splice it up into little segments. We're like, ooh, that's a good 30-second clip. Oh, that minute is really helpful. We take those clips, and guess what? You have reels. It doesn't have to be super hard. You can splice up a video in Canva. You just upload, if you're not sure how to do it, you can always Google it, how to upload video in Canva. It'll show you. So you can edit it in Canva. From there, we take the transcript and we distill it down into 1, maybe 2 or 3 different blogs. Once we have those blogs, we pull out some quotes. That blog has a theme. So maybe the blog has to do with, for example, we have here self-awareness. Oh, well, in her book, she has a whole chapter on self-awareness. So now for more content, we can go to that chapter on self-awareness, pick out a couple chunks that stand alone, copy it, paste it. Maybe you're thinking, I don't have a book. I can't do that. I bet you have something. And if you don't, this is a great opportunity to create that so that 6, 8 months down the line, you already have a body of work that you can keep recycling. From there, maybe if you're someone who has, like a sparser amount of work to go off of, if you're talking about a theme of self-awareness, because it was what was in your talk, maybe that's a good opportunity to find someone else who speaks to self-awareness and share one of their quotes, kind of start that relationship with them professionally, so that eventually you can kind of maybe collaborate or share each other's platforms, which is always helpful in social media. Okay, another example is, this is kind of what I was talking about with the batching. I came up with, this was some of my earlier writing, admittedly, so if you go to my feed, you might not see all of this. So this is from earlier, but I had my content buckets, a quote, "You're not the only one who," "It makes sense that," and then I had this phrase that I love to use, it's, "I'm the happiest angry person you'll ever meet." And people love that. And so I was like, oh, maybe I'll do a spinoff of that. I'm the laziest high achiever you've ever met, or something that just kind of shows the dichotomy of just living with trauma. So what I did is I made the graphic, and then I spent, I set a timer for 30 minutes and I hopped in and I just brainstormed right there in Canva and came up with, 15 to 20 different graphics. I might not use them right away, but when I hit a spot where I'm like, oh, what am I going to do for that? I can go in, I already have the graphics made, and maybe one will jump out and be more inspiring for me to write. Same with quotes. You can spend an afternoon plugging and chugging, going into your blogs, your old social media, pulling out quotes, putting that on a graphic, just creating a body of work so that when you're stuck, you're not trying to grasp for something out of nowhere. And then last example on this, this has more to do with like the repackaging and reinventing. You all might be familiar with Molly LaCroix. I know that she spoke to you a little bit ago. She's in the same writing group as Jean and I, and she's amazing. I also help her with her social media. So here's just like a very tangible example of what you can do. So this was the original post. She posted it in February of 2021. And this, if you follow her, this is not her brand now. And this is kind of different. Her message has kind of evolved like a lot of ours does. So what I did is I took this caption and I turned it into a reel. So let me show you what I did with that. Hopefully you guys can see that. Okay, so the point is, I didn't have to write anything. Molly didn't have to write anything, but this is now a completely new post. Let's talk about these reels. I know I heard from Jean, some of you might want some tips on how to do reels. So let's talk about kind of Molly's style, starting with the basics. You don't have to go over the top. Again, if you just stay consistent with kind of your format, the font that you use, it can almost feel branded without you having to do very much branding at all. So some of you might have a hard time just getting the video footage, or maybe you like get it and you look at it and you're like, gosh, this looks terrible. That's okay. There's lots of resources. So right here, I have one listed. It's pixabay.com. They have stock video. So that post that Molly wrote 2 years ago was about balance. So I just type in balance, look for some videos, download one that makes sense, and then I just copy Molly's words, paste it into the reel, copy, paste. If you don't,
Charissa,
yes,
we all would love to see that video, but none of us could see it. We could just hear it. It's probably because you would need to switch the screen to that particular window on your computer and share that one.
Thank you for telling me.
Yeah, if you would be able to do that, we would love to see it.
Yes, thank you for telling me. I'm so sorry. How awkward. You just saw me responding with my face.
Well, we all heard it. It sounded great.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see here. Um, oh man, this is where technology gets me. Let's see here. I'm gonna go to new share. Maybe is that what?
Yep.
Okay, so
Yep.
okay.
That should be it. Yep.
Um, hmm. Now I am struggling. Let's see here. Um,
And if you can't get it, it's fine. Um, there's that. Yep.
okay.
So if you pull that up and you hit new share and you look for the window that has just that
Ah,
post on it and select
here we
that
go.
window, you'll be able to share that.
Amazing. Thank you.
Awesome.
Okay, here we go. This will be a lot better for all of you, I think. You can see it now?
Yes.
Okay. We'll start from the beginning. So here's the beginning. Okay.
Nice. Thank you. We
Yeah, of
all
course.
can see that now.
What a relief. I'm so glad you said something. Thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, so now can you see my screen again? Let's see, where am I at? Are we back to the presentation?
Yes, we are. Thank
Okay,
you.
excellent. Awesome. So, like you saw, it's nothing mind-blowing. I am not, the film major that was my roommate in college. It's pretty simple. But if you're looking for somewhere to start, that might be a good place to just kind of, wet your whistle and figure out how your content could work with that. So, again, you're just putting the words you've already written onto it. If you're struggling with the timing, there are so many resources out there. Google is just the gift that keeps on giving. So you can always hop in there and, how to adjust timing, how to make reels, and there are so many tutorials. If that feels overwhelming and feels like a hurdle, you can also use Canva. Again, I think I heard that you all have some, Canva know-how, no matter how extreme it might be or might not be. If you go into Canva, you can look for templates of reels that already have timing, so you can just plug your own words in. And you can also kind of create your own. So you can make a graphic just like you would a normal graphic, add a little video clip, come back to a graphic. Maybe you just want the graphics to play by themselves. Those are all things that you can do in Canva if that feels like a medium that you have more history with and feel more comfortable with. So to kind of show you some examples now that I know how to share my screen, I'll show you a couple different ways you can do that. So Terry, we saw some of her posts earlier. She took one day and just recorded herself, doing the finger point, sent it over and said, okay, please make reels out of this. So I used her book. Again, if you have a book, amazing. If you have blogs, awesome. If you need to do some brainstorming of what might make good reels, that's a thing you can batch. But we basically created a reel template that we can just plug and chug with, moving forward. So let me show you two different examples of the same template that have been different reels for her. Can you guys see?
Yes.
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 Okay, I'm feeling comfy in his shirt. Was so nice to have a night when I didn't feel so good. I didn't feel the hurt. Maybe it was the ocean, how I could only see so far when I find.
Okay, so that's example one. And then let's see here. If Instagram will load for me. Okay, so here's example 2, the same template. Okay, so hopefully that kind of gives you an idea that if you build something once, you can take new content and put it into it fairly easy. Just reuse the same thing, song to it, maybe play with the colors, maybe the graphic, but there are ways to, work smarter, not harder with Reels if that's something that you're wanting to try. Okay, and then lastly, and a little bit, the smaller section, strategic approach. So now you're like very clear on your brand, you're clear on what you want to communicate, how you want to communicate. Maybe you have the systems in place to figure out how to do it while protecting your energy, kind of streamline it. Now let's talk about doing it in a way that's strategic for trying new things. Most importantly is just define the goal and set the boundaries around the new things that you want to try. So again, there are so many new things coming at us. It can feel really overwhelming, but if you know what your goal is for your social media, even if it's just for the next 3 months, that can help you figure out what you want to try and what you can put on the back burner to try later. So here are some examples of some goals and approaches. If you want to grow your Instagram account, you might focus on trying new content that people can share. So what are some catchy statements? What's something that's funny that has to do with what you write about? Are there any, tips that you can offer? That kind of thing. That's going to help you share and get your word out to grow. If you're trying to connect, if you have an audience that you feel good about the size, but you want to kind of just take it a little bit deeper, you want to strengthen that relationship, get some, maybe some better engagement. Some posts that you might want to try, include your face, which is weirdly vulnerable, but put your face out there. You can do what Terry did in the videos that I showed you, hype yourself up, get a couple of video recordings. If you're reviews from a book, or if you're trying to talk about something you love sharing, you can film a little video of you saying, I heard the nicest thing, or one of my favorite practices is, and then you can lead into, a template. So you're not having to feel as vulnerable, at the beginning. Another great approach for the goal of connection, Instagram lives, and again, just Reels talking on camera. And lastly, if you are in a season where you're trying to convert, maybe you are promoting a book or selling a product or a course, your posts are obviously going to look more like announcements. You might have more direct call to action, and you can share from the thing that you are selling. So if it's a book, read a little section of it, share some testimonials, some reviews, and then reach out for collaboration. So again, if you tried to do all of these things with all of your posts, it's like, oh my gosh, that's so much. So just really define what your goal is for social media for, 3 months, maybe a year, and then try these approaches in bite sizes that still feel sustainable. Last thing I'll just kind of touch on, because I know we're getting close on time, is to just, be aware of what's working, not just professionally, but also personally. Just because something's effective doesn't mean it's working, if that makes sense. So an example from my own personal writing, I was getting a lot of engagement on Facebook, but part of that engagement was also some family members and people who I knew who kind of struggled to communicate about trauma, and it was kind of activating for me, and it didn't make me feel very safe in that space. And so for me, I decided, you know what, Facebook is not working for me and my topic. And so even though it was working well in terms of content, I had to decide that that wasn't worth it to me. So there might be times where that's a decision you have to make, and vice versa. If you love doing something, you love sharing, in a particular way, but it's not really working, you might want to consider, okay, what needs to be tweaked? What can be different so that it can be fun and effective? So some ways to think of that: look at the metrics on Instagram, figure out, okay, what posts are working. As a consumer, be conscious of what makes you stop your scroll, what makes you read more, and try to incorporate that in your own, unless you hate it, and then don't do it. So in conclusion, last thing, take the right amount of risks. Don't go too hard, too fast. Don't overwhelm yourself. Start with a new post. Once you get comfortable with it, start to add to it. Start to put some of that creative juice that you have into it. And remember that, it feels really vulnerable for us. It's our work, it's our words. And so if you put it out and it seems like it fails, don't feel too embarrassed. It's pretty likely that no one has noticed. So if you hate it and it doesn't work, or you feel stupid, you can always delete it. So that is the nice thing about social media, is it's not permanent. So hopefully that helps to kind of inspire you to try a couple new things, and take some risks out there.
And I'm so glad you're sharing your contact right there, because I was going to ask you to share that. So let's leave that screen up for just about a minute, and then we'll invite people in we've got a few minutes if the people want to ask questions. And Charissa, I got to tell you, the plug and chug thing is power right there. That just almost empowered me to try that. And so and the reminders about branding, that was really good. And you gave us permission, I think, to be ourselves and do it. So often, like you said, we get caught up on the shoulds. So really appreciate that message. Why don't you go ahead and take your screen down, and then we'll invite people in, and people could come on back in if you got this particular question you want to ask her. She is an expert on this. I'd encourage any questions. You had some really, really good feedback all the way through. You got people talking about their brand and I think a lot of people have the sustainability really touched a lot of people, being consistent and sustainable. A lot of people on that. Melissa, do you see Kathy's question that if you could put her Carissa's contact information in the chat too, that might help. I don't know if Melissa, if you could take care of that. That way, she was having trouble with her phone. Okay, Kathy, we'll see if Melissa can help take care of you on that. Johnny, Brandy, questions, comments?
I have a question. Well, there's two questions actually. One is to expand a little bit more on what you were talking about family being on your social media, and how sometimes topics that you don't want to get into with family, because social media is interactive. It's not just work related. It's everybody you know. And I see some people trying to have two pages. They'll have a personal page for family, and then they'll have a work page that, they maybe have a different name. Is that beneficial? Because doesn't it always eventually kind of merge anyway in some capacity, because they find out you have a different page? And then two is on censorship. How do you handle censorship on certain topics? Because we're in a world now where that's an issue too.
That's true.
Yeah, definitely. Great questions. Okay, so to speak to your first question about having like some separate platforms for personal and business, especially with Facebook or, personal brand, I have found that really helpful with my subject. I think there are others who might have, more of a professional type of role. So if you're a therapist or a doctor, like, it's helpful to make that distinction. You're right, people can still find you. Like, if you have a professional page on Facebook and then a personal page, people from your personal page can still get to, your professional, but it does offer that one layer of barrier. And if in the unfortunate situation you need to create a boundary, it's a little bit easier to do that. So again, if you're someone who's sharing tips from your life, if you're kind of more of like sharing efficiency tips or meals or whatever, it might be beneficial to have those combined. It's just a personal choice I found. And in terms of censorship, it's a tricky one. It really is. I try my best to kind of, those kiddie pools where it kind of like you start a little bit shallower and you get deeper and deeper. That's kind of how I try to treat my posts. So with my community, I'm talking about sensitive subjects. I very rarely am just going to come out the gate and blast that out or put it on my first graphic. I'm going to kind of walk people into it. That way, the people who have read that, read far enough in, they've earned that vulnerability, they've earned that trust. And so there might not be as much of a need to censor it, a little bit further in, because it's for them, right? Like if they're reading it, it's for them. That being said, I, know that sometimes social media can block. So I've toyed around with, how can I use words that speak to what I'm talking about without using the exact words? That's not my favorite way to do it, because I think it's important for us to use, certain vocabulary. But if you're speaking to your audience well, I think you can talk to the idea that you're getting at without having to be so blatant in a way that it might get censored.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
That does. Makes a lot of sense in that way. Johnny, what do you got?
Well, I'd like to go back to an early comment that Kathy put in the chat. And so I'm just going to read it, Charissa, and then if you have anything you can say. She says, this is so helpful to hear how you define authenticity. So this is going back to the beginning. I have struggled with others' definitions because I don't want to discuss much about certain trauma I've gone through, and big capital letters, and 2 of my 3 guys are regulated by government jobs. So I have to be careful what I post about them. I admire those that say what you see is what you get, but that's not me. So do you have any ideas or tips for someone who just can't be totally authentic online for whatever reason?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great clarifier.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly because I think it's easy to conflate authenticity with oversharing, maybe.
Yeah.
So just because you're being authentic doesn't mean you're sharing everything. There are parts of my life history and my family that I don't touch. I am very specific about the pieces that I'm able to talk on. And it sounds like, you've maybe gone through a similar process, but for me, it's printed right here in a little frame. I have a very clear list of my no-fly zones. This is what I'm not going to talk about.
Yeah.
Again, that kind of decide once. I've already decided that's not something I feel comfortable talking about. And so I will be authentic. I'll show my no makeup face. Like these are all areas that it's fine, but this area, that's for me. That's those private places. And I think you can still be authentic without having to show everything.
Great. I love that. Thank you.
I love the no-fly zone. You got use of language. You are speaking to writers here.
Well, I think it's great just to have that list and to actually, if there are things you've made that decision about and you've got it posted right there, you're right. It's like, oh, okay, nope.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And that, and Catherine just said, just because you can talk about it doesn't mean you should talk about it. That's true.
Totally.
That is absolutely true. Hey, listen, while we get the recording still going, I do want to talk about next week, and help me say this, Melissa, if I don't have it right. Julie Lavender is here next week, and it's going to talk about inspirational writing. Do you know anything more about that right off the top, Melissa? You want to add?
Not yet.
Okay.
I'm still waiting to hear back, but I'm hopeful we'll hear soon.
Good. So we're excited to have Julie back with us. And while we're still on the recording too, and then we'll invite everybody to stay for the after party for a few minutes. So if you have additional questions, Charissa, can you stay for a few more minutes with us? And then we could ask any more questions. But while we still have the recording, I just really want to thank everybody for participating. We had quite an active chat today, people commenting and replying back and forth. That's what I love about this community. And those of you that have taken the time to watch the replay, I know several people said they were going to rewatch this video again to capture all the ideas. Just thank you for being with us today. Charissa, thank you. I just feel like you've inspired us and given us permissions to be ourselves and to do what we can do. And yet you've gave us some really practical tips too. I think she could take this to a writing conference and present this. I think people would love it. So repurpose it. You told us to repurpose. I think you need to
That's
repurpose that groups, on that way. Anything in closing, Brandy, Johnny, Melissa, you want to add?
I'll just give
Thank
my
you.
typical spiel, I guess, about if you're watching the replay. We would love to have you join us any Tuesday morning, 10 o'clock Central, 11 o'clock Eastern. And of course, check out all of our videos, episodes on our Facebook page at Writers Chat. Members is our group. You're welcome to join that too. And the videos are also on YouTube under the Serious Writer channel.
Right. So thank you, everybody. And we'll see you on next week's Writers Chat. Bye.
Bye-bye.